Welcome back to the channel, Guardians, and I have finally hit the seasonal soft cap of 400, meaning I have access to master and grandmaster activities. And now today for this video, I want to share one of my builds I've been using to achieve this. Now this is going to be a solar hunter build, and some of the staples of it are, it's going to be really easy to use, there's not a lot of min-maxing that needs to go on, it's going to have high survivability, and it happens to synergize with our seasonal artifact. There's a lot of flexibility with this build, and there will be a dim link below, but let's go ahead and get started. Now starting off in our subclass here, like I said, we're going with a solar hunter. I'm just going with blade barrage, but there's nothing wrong with going something like marksman or deadshot. For our abilities here, I'm going with Gambler's Dodge, and that's to help out with our generating our melee and increasing our melee stat. You could go with Marksman Dodge or Acrobat's Dodge as well, especially if you want to have a little bit of an easier time having access to Radiant, but all three of these are good choices. And then when it comes to your knife, I'm going with Knife Trick, and that's to spread Scorch. You could also go with the weighted throwing knife, because if you get a precision hit on a scorched target, it's going to ignite them, but pulling this off is a little too high skill for me. And next up is our grenade. We're going with the healing grenade. This is obviously to cure ourselves, but also to give us that restoration effect. And this is going to be one of the main survivability tools for this build. Now when it comes to your aspects here, we're going with On Your Mark, and they did a change with On Your Mark where precision final blows, and when you get 3 stacks, you become radiant for a short time. So that's why taking something like Acrobat over here, Acrobat Dodge, isn't necessary, because with On Your Mark here, we're going to have access to Radiant. And then the other aspect we're going with is Gunpowder Gamble. This is going to give us that improvised solar explosive. So we kind of get the best of both worlds when it comes to our grenade, because we're going to have the explosive here, so like a traditional grenade, but then we're also going to have our healing grenade as well. So a lot of things going on with our grenade slot. Now moving on to our fragments here, we're going to be leaning more towards the survivability side. So our first fragment we're taking here is Embers of Imperium. Every time we get a solar weapon blow or a solar ability, it's going to extend our restoration and the irradiant effects on us. And so right at the start here, we already have synergy with our healing grenade, because as long as we're slaying out with our solar weapon and our solar abilities, we're going to stay with that restoration effect. It's going to be very hard to kill us. And then moving on to our next fragment, we're going with Embers of Searing. So defeating a scorched target grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. So that fire sprite is really what we want to be looking at here, because when we pick up a fire sprite, it's going to grant us grenade energy. Again, feeding back into our healing grenade. Oh, and we also get +10 to our class stat, which that's pretty good too. And then our third fragment is going to be Ember of Mercy. So when we revive an ally, everybody around us is going to get restoration. This is a nice team effect. But really, it's that second part there. Picking up a fire sprite grants restoration. We have 2 ways of getting restoration. One is with our healing grenade, and the other is when we pick up a fire sprite. And with Embers of Searing here, we're going to be creating fire sprites all the time. Again, with these 3 fragments in our grenade, we're really ensuring that we're always going to have access to that restoration effect. And again, that's going to make us very tanky. Now for the last 2 fragments, these are kind of flex picks. I'm going with Ember of Ashes, just when I'm going to apply more Scorch to targets. And then I'm also going with Ember of Singeing, which states that our class ability will recharge faster when we scorch targets. Some other good options for these last 2 picks, something like Ember of Solace. This can be good too, but I don't pick this one because we're going to have our grenade up all the time. And then we're also going to be picking up fire sprites as well. So having increased duration for Radiant and Restoration, I don't really think it's necessary. A popular pick is Ember of Torches. This is going to let you throw your melee a lot, but this was always a main way to get that Radiant effect. But with some of the changes that they've done to Solar Hunter here, there's other avenues to get Radiant now. So I don't think this one is as necessary as it was before. So that's our fragments out of the way. Let's go ahead and move on to what stats you should be focusing on for your Guardian. Stat wise, I would try to bump up your weapon stat as high as possible. That way you're getting increased damage with your weapon, and then also it's going to help out your reload and handling. So that would be my main priority. After that, I would just make sure your grenade is above 70, and then that your class is also at around 100. Now I have my class stat here at 122, so getting that extra little bit of overshield every time we dodge, it's kind of a nice feature here, because we're going to have a lot of restoration going on and curing with our grenade, but also when we dodge, we're going to gain a overshield as well. So it feels pretty nice to have all these options as far as survivability. Now before we talk about armor, let's go ahead and talk about what weapons you should be using. In the primary slot here, I think everybody in the game, no matter what, should be getting a mint retrograde. These rocket assisted pulse rifles do insane amounts of damage. So even if you don't have a good roll, I would still just make sure you get one of these and put them in your kinetic slot here, because they are so good. So this is going to be a good damage source for tanky targets and even bosses. Now our main slayout weapon here just needs to be something solar that has that incandescent effect that's going to spread scorch. I'm going with Sunshot here, but I've also traded it out for the BXR 55 battle rifle here, basically from Halo 2. But this thing has incandescent and demolitionist for me, and this thing feels amazing as well. So the big takeaway from your energy slot here is just make sure you have a solar weapon that slays out and probably has that incandescent effect. Now when it comes to your power weapon here, I just went with Commemoration. This has Killing Tally and 4th times the charm. This is going to help slay out on, I would say, heavier targets, something like majors, and can do a fair bit of boss damage as well. But our main boss damage source is actually going to be our Mint Retrograde here. This thing just does, again, a crap ton of damage. But overall, with your power or heavy weapon here, you can kind of pick what you want. I would just really, again, lock in a Mint Retrograde and a really good solar weapon here. Now moving to the armor section here where we're going to talk about armor mods, I would go with a Harmonic Siphon. This is going to give us orbs when we're slaying out with our Sunshot there. And then I feel like the last two slots you just do a special and then a heavy ammo finder. And then moving to our arm slot here, I would go with Firepower. This is going to give us an orb every time we get a final blow with our grenade. This does synergize with the improvised grenade that we get from Gunpowder Gamble. And then I went with something like Impact Induction here. So when we do our powered melee, our grenade cooldown is going to get reduced. You could switch this out with something like every time we do grenade damage, our class ability, we get class ability energy. That'd be a good choice too. And then for the last one here, I just went with melee font. And so every time we pick up an orb of power and we have our armor charges, our melee stat there is going to be bumped up by 25. These font mods are really, really good. I don't think it's necessary to do a grenade font here because we have our healing grenade as well, and our cooldown is already pretty close to max at the moment. So having the melee font here, every time we dodge and we have an armor charge, it's just going to help our melee come back even quicker. Because even if this bumps up our melee to over 50, I think it needs to be at that 70 mark to where you dodge and then you get your full melee back. So with this font active, it'll get us pretty close. And then when it comes to your chest piece, just always pick up resistances depending on what activity you're doing and what enemies you're going up against. These really help out with survivability. And for our legs here, I went with 2 solar weapon surges. These are going to help out our slaying out weapon, which in our case here is Sunshot. They're going to benefit us more than if we were to take, say, something like a weapons font. Weapons font is probably the one font that you can probably stay away from because our weapon stat here is already at 185. That's giving us a 12.7%. If we make it closer to, or if we take a weapons font and we make it to 200 whenever we have a armor charge, it's only going to bump it up to 15%. So we're getting a lot more benefit from having 2 surge mods here. And then for the last slot here, I just went with Innervation. So every time we make an orb and we pick it up, it's going to reduce our cooldown. But honestly, this last slot here, kind of up to you. You could take Insulation instead to help reduce your class ability, or heck, even Recuperation to get some health. I don't think you can go wrong either way. For our class item here, for our hunter here, we could go with something like Time Dilation, so our armor charges last longer. And then something like Powerful Attraction, so every time we dodge, we're going to pick up all the orbs in the area. And then for the last slot here, I just went with Class Font, so every time we have an armor charge, our class stat there is going to be even higher. And in our case here, why we're doing that is every time we're charged up and we do a dodge, that overshield is just going to be even stronger. You could go with something like Reaper instead, but I really don't think we have a problem creating orbs. And then something like Bomber, Outreach, or Distribution. These are good options too. This last pick, kind of a flex. Ooh, and you know what? Time Dilation would also probably be a good choice here because we have a lot of things riding on our armor charges. And then when it comes to exotic armor pieces, something like Lucky Pants can be really good because if you're using something like Sunshot and you have this illegally modded holster procced, you're going to be able to dish out a ton of damage for champions and majors. So that could be a really good choice. I know something like Caliban's Hand, if you want to switch out your knife, this will improve your proximity knife to do scorching damage. So I would consider this to also be a pretty good choice for this build as well. And when it comes to something like Young Ahamkara's Spines here, this would be more for a Trip Mine build, and we're going with more of the healing grenade for this video here. So maybe we'll do a Trip Mine build in the future. Now the last thing about armor here that is new to Edge of Fate are the armor set bonuses. I am rocking a full set of the Solstice gear. So every time I receive healing, my solar weapons are going to reload faster, and that's helpful because Sunshot on its own has a pretty slow reload. But that 4 set piece there, Rapid Solar Final Blows, will heal me, and that fits perfectly with our Solar Hunter here. Now, just to be very clear, I don't think you'd need this armor set bonus to make this build work. This is more so a cherry on top. Now, when it comes to our artifact, everything we've discussed so far should be evergreen past this season, but it doesn't mean that our seasonal artifact here isn't helping out with this build. So some of the important perks from this artifact that are going to help this build out, something like Fever and Chill, solar weapon precision hits are going to grant us Radiant, and then something like Elemental Benevolence. Our allies, whenever we pick up a elemental buff, in our case that's a fire sprite, it's going to increase our class ability Energy. And then because we have Mint Retrograde and that can roll a Slice, Strand debuffs to non-boss combatants take increased damage from solar sources, which again, this is a solar build, so that just synergizes. And then for these last couple perks here, Shoulder to Shoulder, this can be nice in a group setting there. And then for the last two, I went with Radiant Shrapnel. This is going to cause a bunch of solar explosions as long as we're doing damage with a radiant weapon or we're defeating scorched combatants. And the last perk here, I went with Shield Crush. And that is for the second part about this perk. While you're amplified or radiant, your grenade recharges faster and deals increased damage. And I think there are a few other options. Elemental Overdrive, this can be nice as well because our elemental pickup, Fire Sprite, will increase damage of that same element. So again, more solar synergy there. But like I said, with this artifact here, this doesn't make or break the build, and this build should be evergreen, but it does benefit it. All right, so for a quick recap and an overview of the build and how it's going to flow, this build heavily relies on making sure you have that restoration effect up and that you're slaying out with your solar weapon. So if you know you're about to go into a tough situation, throw that grenade down preemptively and start taking down targets to then start generating fire sprites. Those fire sprites are going to keep your restoration up even longer. And then you can use something like your Knife to Scorch Target, which is going to give you your dodge back. Your dodge, in some cases, might have some overshield attached to it, so some more survivability. And then every time your improvised solar grenade is up, go ahead and toss that for some big chunks of damage. Now, if you're not using something like the Lucky Pants and you come across a champion or a major target, you've got your power slot, in this case the Commemoration, or you have your Mint Retrograde to deal them really fast. Alright y'all, that's the video, that's the build. What I like to focus on when it comes to buildcraft is making stuff that is viable on Grandmaster, but you don't really need to min-max. Now this build in particular, it isn't for speeding through something like solo ops, but it's to do them comfortably and has a really easy play flow. And I think this build actually really excels in something like Onslaught, like the Midtown maps. And you can definitely take it into anything fireteam ops or pinnacle activities, but this is definitely not like a PvP build or something I would use for like raid boss damage. And I basically really glazed over exotic armor pieces because most of the time when I was power leveling, I didn't have any exotic armor on and this build was working out just fine. But anyways, if you guys made it this far, thank you very much. If you want to see more Destiny content, consider joining the channel and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace and take care.